What was your "it seemed like a good idea at the time" story? When I was a kid, I tried to ride my bike up the trunk of a tree so I could kick off and try to land it, and it'd be really cool. Turns out a tree trunk is rounded, and so you'll just slip off the trunk and hit your head on the tree. My brother still gives me it about trying to ride my bike up a tree. Playing sled dog with my newly rescued husky and a longboard on the hilly streets near my house in college. Snapped my right forearm in half and had to walk a mile back home to get a ride to the hospital. Shooting each other with fireworks on New Year's. One landed directly in between my eyes. Luckily, it didn't go off and I wasn't injured. Being roommates with someone I had a huge crush on. It didn't end well. Me and my friend used to play a game where we threw a Swiss Army knife up in the air at nighttime and then ran away from it, with the knife part out. Holding onto my friend's car mirror while skateboarding on a newly paved parking lot. I ran across the street with my eyes closed. When I was 14, I didn't get hit by a car. However, I ran into a tree headfirst and cut my face and knee open. For all of you asking what my thought process was, it is as follows. Who am I kidding? I have no idea what I was thinking. Hey, you know those degenerates who you stay out drinking with until sunrise every other day? Why don't you live with them for the last 2 years of law school? That won't cause any issues at all. Cue 2 years of abuse to my body and liver and more than a little strain between me and my friends at the time. Overall it was fun, but definitely not a good idea. So I was in Uganda with my family, and we see a large, about 5 feet tall, curled up leaf hanging about 8 feet off the ground. We're told that these leaves curl up and fall out the trees, and they're pretty heavy, so it can be dangerous to have it fall on you. My dad and I think, won't it be helpful of us to get this thing down? So, we're there whacking it with sticks, trying to get it down. To no avail. When my dad says, "Hey, climb up on that wall there, son, and jump, grab it and then pull it down." Well, that sounds like a swell idea, Dad, so I do just that. I don't manage to get it all the way down, but as soon as I hit the ground, I get this burning sensation in my elbow. Turns out there's a hive of Ugandan mud wasps living in this specific leaf, and they do not take kindly to young men trying to tug their home down. So I'm just sprinting back to the office where the rest of my family is sheltered from the sun, and I practically have 2 elbows on one arm at this point while, as my dad described it later, an army of large, black blots give chase. I make it back inside and my arm is numb, except for the searing pain in my elbow. Thankfully, there was no further reaction. The pain lasted only around 3 hours and the swelling was down by the end of the day. That being said, it was the worst pain I've ever felt. Even worse than the time I broke my arm into 3 pieces while arm wrestling. When I was 15, my best friend and I just got new BB pistols. They were the Walther CP99. Looked identical to the real Walther CP9 with a removable magazine and no orange tip. We were playing with them in the backseat of his mom's car. They weren't loaded. We were just excited and wanted to take them out of the box. She knew we had them out and didn't think anything of it. This was the late 90s BTW. Before going back to his house, she went through the drive-thru at Burger King. You know where this is going. She's ordering food with 2 large 15-year-olds holding guns and pointing them at everything. Fast forward 30 minutes. We are pulling into their driveway and his dad comes running out of the house yelling hysterically. One of his friends just called and said he heard on the police scanner that they were looking for his vehicle with 2 white males holding a female hostage at gunpoint. Few minutes later, several police cars pull in the driveway, jump out with guns out, making everyone get on the ground. It took some explaining on his dad's part about us being a bunch of dumbasses. 15-year-old me couldn't figure out what all the fuss was about, but 34-year-old me looks back and realizes that might be the dumbest thing I have ever done. Applying for a PhD position. Itty pay and no free time in sight for the next 3 years. Thanks to it, I despise working in science like never before. Moving in with my girlfriend. I ducked up. It's a disaster that I should have seen coming. So back in the day, my brothers and I were shooting a bow and arrow behind our house. We had a proper backstop and a nice target on a bale of hay. After about an hour we were getting bored and one of my brothers had a stroke of genius. Let ducking light one on fire. So there we are wiring rags to arrows and soaking them in gas and shooting stuff. Didn't take long and half the yard was on fire. We'd shot pretty much every flammable thing we could burn in the yard. Since we were running short on stuff to shoot, my brother decided to launch one in a 45 arc over the woods behind the house. We all watched, saw, laughing and giggling. When it hit the apex was when it dawned on us that this was in fact a really stupid ducking idea. All 6 of us sprinted off into the woods in the direction it had been shot. Wasn't hard to find, it had lit an entire little meadow on fire. So we ran around stomping out fires for an hour. When we finally got the fire put out, we were sitting by the creek and my oldest brother looks at us all and says, "Dad never hears a word about this." I let my 14-year-old cousin at the time try driving the family car. I was like 18 back then or 20, and I told him it's easy to drive an automatic car. Basically like driving a go-kart. Told him gas was right and brakes were center. I forgot to mention that changing the gear to D will automatically have the car move. We both panicked and hit a ducking tree in front of us at probably 1 mile per hour. Luckily we were in our neighborhood by a dead end. When I was a teenager, my brother, cousin, and a couple of friends decided to try to steal a Coke vending machine by tipping it over into the back of a Ford Ranger pickup and take off. We were like, we'll just put it in our garage and have plenty of soda and we'll refill it. We had one of those keys for them. It was 2 in the morning and we're all wasted. This was mid-90s mind you and way out in the country. There was a little store with the machine. We backed up and my brother and I got it rocking back and forth and finally ballum into the back of the truck. It lifted the front end of the truck off the ground and as soon as it landed in the bed my buddies started hauling ass with me trying to jump into the bed with the vending machine, and my brother hopped on the back of the vending machine riding it like a majestic horse. But we forgot to unplug it and for some reason it was dual-used enough that it pulled the machine out the truck with my brother on it and crashed to the ground. We were young, dumb, and bored as hell, but it made perfect sense to me then. Going on a 4-day bender with no sleep. Ended up getting the it kicked out of me and required 7 stitches in the back of my head. Spending 2 months wages. Losing my brand new Uacute 1000 phone and pissing off numerous ex-girlfriends by declaring my love for them. Oh, and I was hungover for about a week. Haven't had a drink for 3 months now because of my stupidity. It was winter in New York. I was on my way to a party in the Lower East Side with my girlfriend. There was still plenty of snow on the ground from a recent storm. We were having dinner beforehand, and since the party was only a neighborhood away, we decided to walk the distance. Somewhere around Soho I notice a yellow cab letting out a passenger. When the car behind it started laying on its horn, the cab was barely in the intersection, not really blocking traffic, and he was simply doing his job. But the car behind it just kept honking. Then they just held the horn down. So I bent down, made a snowball, and threw it at the noisy car. The horn immediately stopped. I shouted, "Shut the duck up." Almost instantly, 2 men get out of the car and yell, "Hey, come here." To which I yelled back, "Why? What are you gonna do? Call the cops?" To which they replied, "We are the cops." Oh, it was an unmarked cop car. I yelled back at them, "Oh, duck off," as they walked towards me. We then had a very heated discussion about me having too much to drink and them acting like cunts. It ended with them telling me to go home and not to the party. Then I went to the party. Starting a career in television in the late 90s. I mean, the internet is cool and all, but it's still way too slow to ever compete with 200 TV channels, right? Snow water skiing. Me driving the snowmobile across a snowy field and my little brother skiing behind holding a tow rope. 2 broken legs. I went on a solo trip to Costa Rica when I was 26. I'm a fairly petite female. I speak no Spanish. The eco lodge I was staying at helped me arrange a guide for an all-day hike. We were flown by 4-seater plane into the jungle. A 26-hour walk to the nearest town. We landed. Jose and I hopped out, and the plane took off again, leaving me, Jose and his machete alone for the day. Thankfully it went okay, but as soon as that plane took off I realized I had made a bad choice. I had just finished this bike ride with my scout troop and we ended it at the side of a river, so waiting for our parents to pick us up. The boys all go to a rope swing to duck around in the river. It was absurdly shallow. The furthest swing would still land you in 3-foot water. Average lazy swing was 2 feet deep or so. Mum comes. Some dad hollers at me that she's arrived. I run back until I can see her getting out of the car and yell, "One more swing, Mom, I'll be right back." She seems in a good mood. Says okay. Starts chatting with other adults there. So not 2 minutes later I walk up to her with a broken arm. I had gone back for that one more swing, screwed up and planted my wrist into the shallow water, broke my arm, and got out of the water saying bye without telling the kids what I'd done. Just sorta walked up to my mom. "Hey, I just broke my arm. Sorry." She was not pleased. Like, seriously, flick my dick. You had to go for one more swing. Come on, let's go get a cast, you idiot. Having sex with Sherry. She gave me crabs. Dating my co-worker even though I have been down this path once before. We lasted for a while before I caught him flirting with a new girl in front of me. I found out a lot of things after the fact and it nearly destroyed me. On a rainy day, I saw a hitchhiker near the university asking for a ride. He looked the part of a student. Although I never pick up hitchhikers, I felt sorry for him standing in the rain and gave him a lift. It felt like the right thing to do at the time. He told me where he was headed, so I went out of my way to drive him there. The guy just kept staring at me and said very little. When we arrived at his destination, he wouldn't get out of my car, no matter what. Finally, when a police officer came along, I told him to hop out or I'd call the cop over for help. That ended it. But if the officer hadn't come by, I have no idea what might have happened. When I was working in retail for the first time, I was hired with 3 other people as seasonal employees for Black Friday and holiday season, and towards the end of the day, they would send us to go bring in any shopping carts buggies that were outside, and usually we would have to push it in ourselves because we didn't have one of those machines that would push it for you, and someone suggested, why don't we just make one huge cart line and push it in instead of having 4 different lines, and everyone agreed, so we get everything and lined up about 60-70 something carts. Took 3 of us to push it as it was so heavy, and the other guy guiding it at the front. We managed to get inside the store and into the cart area, but being a whole line and heavy as it, we couldn't stop it in time, so it blew past the rail, and unfortunately on the other side of the cart area is where we kept the dishwashers, refrigerators, TVs that are supposed to be going out for delivery sold. We ended up breaking a TV and denting a fridge. Unfortunately, the store manager was doing his night rounds around the store and saw the whole thing as he was coming down the main hall. We got yelled at pretty bad and immediately just told us to go home and to see him in his office tomorrow morning. It seemed like a good idea though. Lol. In college, a large group of us hiked up to this abandoned mine shaft at night. Took turns squeezing through a small crack in the mountain. The main entrance was closed off. Walked down a long dark corridor with our flashlights. Then set up a campfire in one of the large clearings at the end and proceeded to get wasted. All fun and games until a rather large girl got too drunk and couldn't walk on her own. Getting her out of there was a whole ducked up ordeal. Thought a few times during the process that we were going to have to leave her there in the dark and go get help, especially when my flashlight started to die. Decided to get high and go to a yoga class because I thought I would get a better mind-muscle connection. Turns out the class I decided to go to was being taught by an Eastern European yoga psychopath and had me bending my body in ways I have never done before. Never again. Dating a girl that had a crush on me. Didn't know her all that well beforehand, other than that she was relatively quiet and an outsider at school. Relationship eventually ended because I wouldn't let her tie me up and put a knife to my throat during sex. Zero issues with the tying me up part, but the knife was a deal breaker. She did a presentation that compared some hentai to the Bible in our religious instruction class a few weeks after we broke up. The teacher actually let her show a few minutes of a hentai movie before intervening. Ducking a shampoo bottle, courtesy of our teenagers. My 3DS had trouble reading the cartridges, so I put water in the game slot. I no longer have a 3DS. I practiced my golf swing while standing on my bed. It was raining outside. I managed to take out 2 lights with the first swing, the bedside lamp and the overhead light. That one crashed down on my head. Broken glass everywhere.